Jason eagerly anticipated Rachel's arrival for their first date movie night. They'd connected over their shared love for horror films online, and he'd invited her over to his apartment for what he hoped would be a thrilling evening. As Rachel entered, her smile seemed a touch too eager, her eyes flickering with an unsettling intensity. Jason shrugged off the unease, attributing it to first date nerves, and they settled in to watch their chosen movie, a classic horror flick. As the movie played, Jason began to feel woozy, his vision blurring and his limbs growing heavy. Panic surged through him as he realized he was being drugged. But by then, it was too late. When Jason awoke, he found himself bound to a chair, his head throbbing with a dull ache. Fear gripped him as he struggled against his restraints, but Rachel stood over him, her expression cold and calculating. It turned out Rachel wasn't who she claimed to be. She was a member of a notorious criminal syndicate known for their involvement in illegal organ trafficking. Jason's organs were to be harvested and sold on the black market, his life reduced to nothing more than a commodity. With adrenaline coursing through his veins, Jason fought against his bonds, his mind racing for a way to escape. Summoning all his strength, he managed to break free, the ropes falling away as he lunged for the door. Rachel's eyes widened in shock as Jason made his escape, but she recovered quickly, lunging after him in a desperate attempt to stop him. But Jason was fueled by fear and desperation, his every instinct screaming at him to run. With a burst of speed, Jason raced out into the night, his heart pounding in his chest as he fled from the horrors of his own apartment. Behind him, Rachel disappeared into the darkness, her fate unknown as she vanished without a trace. As Jason stumbled through the streets, he knew he had narrowly escaped a fate worse than death. But the memory of that terrifying first date would haunt him for the rest of his days, a stark reminder of the dangers that we invite to our homes. Tom eagerly awaited Lindsay's arrival at his apartment for their first date. They'd matched on a dating app, and he was hopeful that she would be as interesting in person as she seemed online. As the minutes ticked by, Tom's excitement grew, and when Lindsay finally arrived, his heart skipped a beat. Lindsay's smile lit up the room as she greeted Tom, her eyes sparkling with mischief. They exchanged pleasantries, and Tom couldn't help but feel a flutter of nerves as he led her inside. As they settled in, conversation flowed easily between them. Lindsay was charming and witty, and Tom found himself drawn to her magnetic personality. They laughed and shared stories, each moment feeling more comfortable than the last. As the evening progressed, Tom suggested opening a bottle of wine to celebrate their meeting. Lindsay agreed enthusiastically, and soon they were toasting to their budding connection, the wine flowing freely between them. But as the night wore on and the alcohol took its toll, Tom began to feel a bit woozy. He tried to brush it off, chalking it up to nerves, but as the room started to spin, he realized he was in trouble. With a sinking feeling in the pit of his stomach, Tom realized he was too drunk to function. He stumbled to the couch, his head swimming with dizziness, as Lindsay looked on with concern. In a haze, Tom watched as Lindsay moved around the apartment, fetching pillows and blankets for him to lie down. He tried to protest, but his words came out slurred and unintelligible. Before long, Tom's eyelids grew heavy, and he drifted off into a deep sleep, completely unaware of the events unfolding around him. Hours later, Tom awoke with a start, his head pounding with a dull ache. He blinked groggily, trying to make sense of his surroundings, but when he looked around, he realized he was alone. Panic surged through him as he realized Lindsay was gone, and when he looked closer, he realized she'd taken more than just her leave. His wallet was missing from the table, along with his phone and several other valuable items. Feeling a sense of betrayal and anger, Tom's mind raced as he tried to piece together what had happened. It was then that he remembered the wine they'd shared, and he realized with horror that he'd been drugged. As the reality of the situation sank in, Tom's heart sank. He couldn't believe someone would take advantage of him like that, especially someone he'd trusted enough to invite into his home. Feeling shaken and vulnerable, Tom vowed to be more careful in the future. He knew he couldn't let one bad experience ruin his trust in people. But he'd definitely be more cautious from now on. As he called the police to report the theft, Tom couldn't shake the feeling of betrayal that lingered in the air. It was a harsh reminder that not everyone had good intentions, and that sometimes even the most charming smiles could hide the darkest secrets. Romilda's heart raced as she waited at the dimly lit cafe for her blind date, Michael. They'd connected online, his profile promising excitement and adventure, but as the minutes dragged on, her anticipation turned to apprehension. Finally, he arrived, his grin wider than she remembered from his pictures. Romilda tried to push aside her nerves as they settled into conversation, but there was an intensity to Michael that made her uneasy, like he was hiding something beneath his charming exterior. As the evening unfolded, Michael's stories grew more thrilling, but also more sinister. He spoke of danger and excitement with a wild glint in his eye, and Romilda couldn't shake the feeling that there was something off about him. When he suggested they take a stroll in the nearby park, Romilda hesitated, but his magnetic charisma drew her in. As they wandered deeper into the shadows, Romilda's senses screamed danger, but she couldn't bring herself to leave. Suddenly, Michael stopped, his gaze locking onto Romilda with an intensity that sent a chill down her spine. Before she could react, he lunged at her, his hands closing around her throat with a strength that left her gasping for air. Panic surged through Romilda as she fought for survival, her instincts screaming at her to break free. With a surge of adrenaline, she managed to push him away and fled into the darkness, the sound of his laughter echoing behind her. Terrified and disoriented, Romilda stumbled through the night, her heart pounding in her chest as she searched for safety. When she finally reached the safety of her home, she collapsed in a trembling heap, vowing never to trust a stranger again. As she lay there, shaken but alive, Romilda couldn't shake the feeling that she had narrowly escaped a brush with something truly sinister. And as she drifted off to sleep, she prayed that she would never have to face the nightmare of that blind date again.